Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. And by the way, if I ever had any free time, I redesigned these darn speaker mic things because they're not made for women and dresses. Okay. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, good morning, everyone. I have to say, how impressed am I with this group this morning? Sunday morning, seriously. I woke up, my alarm went off, and I was like, if I weren't speaking, I'm not sure that I would be showing up. But I love the dedication and enthusiasm I see around the world. I just told another blockchain colleague that there was a snowstorm in New York about 2 weeks ago, and I was speaking at a Women in Blockchain panel, and I was convinced on a Wednesday night after work, in the middle of a snowstorm, nobody was going to show up. Well, guess what? 150 people showed up in a tiny-ass little room in an incubator space in New York. So people are dedicated around the world, and I'm very impressed, and I appreciate your time. Your time is precious, so I want to get practical, because this is not necessarily a technical talk about what's happening at the infrastructure level of blockchain. This is a talk of my views, my observations for having been in this space, and I'm going to talk a little bit how I got into this. Really around some of the trends that I'm seeing. And I'm hoping, as each of you are learning at various stages of this, crazy kind of journey we're all on as a community, that you will hopefully get some ideas or maybe get a better sense of what's going on globally. And I want to add one more side note. LA, you guys have really kind of upset me in the last couple of days because you're pretty amazing. Like, I love it here so much, I'm like wondering if I should set up shop here. Like, what? So thank you. You've been amazing. Everyone I've met so far, I actually, and I don't say this everywhere I go, just for your information, I actually think something really special is happening in LA, and I think you guys are going to lead the path for some pretty amazing developments. Blockchain, LA, I think this is going to be something really amazing over the next couple years, so stay at it. You're going to have challenges, but I think actually there's some really, really cool stuff. And it's not about just Silicon Valley or San Francisco or New York or London. It's going to be LA. So let's talk about that. Let me talk to you about how I got started. So I've been in the foreign exchange markets for like my whole young career life. I started off as a financial engineer in London. I am a reforming banker, I guess you could say. I say reforming because I'm not sure I'm completely reformed, but I got into Bitcoin because a buddy of mine from the FX market said, hey, you need to look at this white paper. And like most people who started off kind of in like 2011, 12, I read the white paper and I was like, But I was a banker, so I was like, And I didn't really understand and get it. So I had to read it again, and I read it again. Finally, I did have that light bulb moment where I was like, crap, wait, this could destroy banking. And if it does, then everything changes. And that's kind of where I got set on that road. As mentioned, I was at CME Group for about 5 years. I led the digitization. I actually created and led the digitization effort there, which is basically digital assets and blockchain, and trying to convince people inside the firm that Bitcoin and crypto was real, it's a new asset class, and we need to pay attention to it. It took a couple years, but CME got the Bitcoin futures out the door in December, so I was very pleased to see that. I left in July, and I'll tell you why I left in July. I left in July because at that point I'd been receiving all kinds of information and opportunities. And I realized, for me, I had to make a decision. And I decided to make a very conscious decision, which is I'm focusing on blockchain for social good projects. And I'm going to use this tech to help those, especially who are outside of financial markets, formal financial markets. And why is that important? Because here's the thing. If you don't have an identity, if you don't have your assets registered, if you don't have recognized authority or a network telling or you to be able to prove that you own something, your life is really limited. And I don't think many people in this room probably have that problem, but go anywhere around the world and you'd be surprised by how much that is reality. And so what can this tech do? So I'm going to talk a couple things. Here we go. So everyone's been obsessed in 2017 about sort of this, magic internet money, which, it's okay. I'm like, if you're into that, that's fine. The token element is really important, but here's the thing. Last year, I do feel like we got completely overwhelmed with cryptocurrency and ICO mania. This year, I would like all of us to really think about how we change that dialogue. I would like us to actually think about how do we focus on this tech to actually focus on deep core infrastructure changes if you're a developer. That means interoperability, and I'm going to talk about a few of the projects that are out there that are focused on interoperability of blockchains. I want to talk about how this is going to impact geographies and distribution. This is meant to be decentralized. So, if we end up in a situation where only the best companies kind of come out of Silicon Valley, New York, and London, we've all failed, as far as I'm concerned. Okay? This is meant to be decentralized and distributed. And we'll talk about the notion of corporation as well. It's not a blockchain. It's going to be many blockchains. It's pretty obvious now. We're going to have private. We're going to have hybrid. We're going to have public. So what do we do in a world when we have hundreds, if not thousands, of blockchains being built? Solution? Well, some blockchains will exist in very limited use cases. Some blockchains will be private because they serve a specific group or a purpose. That's fine. It may be that, that's what's right for that group. But for us to have large-scale, really truly decentralized networks, we're going to need a way to talk to each other, or the blockchains are going to need to find a way to talk to each other. So a couple projects I'm really spending a lot of time with are Cosmos, which are the Tendermint guys, and they've just launched a number of research centers around the world. And if you want to check that out, Cosmos is starting to put out, they've already got a white paper and whatnot, but they're actually starting to put out releases about how they're going to make interoperability between blockchains work. Polkadot, which is Parity Technologies, they're another group looking at this problem. And I think this is going to be key. If our blockchains don't talk to each other, then what do we end up with? Oh, I don't know. I think we end up with islands of databases and networks again. Okay, so these are a few. I know some of you who are actually in this space are going to say, well, R3 Corda is not a blockchain. Okay, fine. There's a few up there that you could question whether they're a blockchain or not. But I've just put a few logos up there just to give you a sense that there's private, there's public, there's a lot of things going on, and these are just a handful. There's many more, as you saw with presentations yesterday. I'm not going to go too far into this, but one area I'm also looking at is smart contracts meets IoT. I never thought I would say this in front of a group of people, but actually, I'm looking at how we can start recording bovine and improve their tags with smart contracts. So meaning tracking cattle and their history, vaccination history, birth history, origin, genetics, and how do we put that in a blockchain? Because recording livestock is actually a pretty important use case, and that requires a bit of IoT thinking. We haven't solved it yet, so anyone interested? There's a whole thing we can do in bovine world. Okay, let's talk about some trends. Global distribution and growth. I want everyone to think about the fact that this technology is going to have some really interesting countries promoting, and we're already seeing it. The small countries actually have the ability now, because they're nimble, and their governments are aligned and they're focusing. Countries like Estonia, Iceland, Sweden, Mauritius. There's some maps. I've put maps on for a purpose. There's certain maps that flags you probably wouldn't recognize right away. These are the smaller countries. So what I'm trying to say is, although China, Japan, US, Russia dominate, don't forget the small countries, the small islands. They're working on this too. And that's kind of the beauty of this technology, is the underdog, the small guys, they all have a fair shot at this. I'm going to talk about Mauritius, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I've joined a company called UWIN. UWIN stands for Unleashing Wealth in Nations. And the original visionary and founder of this is my business partner, Julius Akinyemi. He's currently the MIT Entrepreneur in Residence at the MIT Media Lab. And he came up with the concept of, if you could unleash existing wealth. In developing nations, people have land. People have stuff. What's the problem? It's not documented, not valued. You have a car, you have a title to it, you know it's yours, and based on the various companies that are out there, you can kind of figure out what your value is of your car, right? No matter how old it is or whatever the make and model is. Well, most people in these countries do not have that. And even ones that are as developed as Mauritius is, actually. By the way, how many people know where Mauritius is? I actually had to look on a map, too. Okay, pretty good. Off the coast of Cape Town in South Africa is Madagascar. off the coast of Madagascar is Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. So there you go. Mauritius is really focused on becoming a blockchain island. And here's the thing that's going to be interesting about Mauritius. They are focused on the fact that trade between China and India to Africa is on the rise. So if you believe in that thesis, then Mauritius will be absolutely critical to be a bridge and a conduit for that trade. And that trade is significant. Things that Mauritius is doing. They're launching a Mauritius Blockchain Center of Excellence. What they don't have there is brain trust, meaning the talent who actually knows a lot about blockchain. So they're going to be flying in some of that talent to then plant the seeds at their universities and to actually create a blockchain network and community. They want to create incubators, they want to create companies, they want to have an entire ecosystem being developed in Mauritius that will help very specifically with them to also be the gateway to trade in Africa, India, and China. That's pretty significant. Just so you know, they're also one of the largest sugar producers in the world. So they have a significant agriculture population, which is on the decline. So if you're a country like Mauritius, there's an island of 1.6 million people, you actually have to diversify pretty quickly. And so they're thinking about all of that, which is pretty cool. And there have been some headlines. Consensus was there, and they're working on SALT is also, one of the guys from SALT is also there. So there's nothing happening in Mauritius. There's actually quite a bit. I want to talk about use case, because this is a real one that some of you might find very interesting. So this is a project that we're doing under UWIN. Sovereign natural asset intellectual property preservation and recording. What does that mean? Well, here's the thing. A lot of islands in particular have indigenous seeds and plants. Do you know that pharmaceutical companies and cosmetics companies go to these islands, take those plants and seeds, or maybe sometimes they even pay for them and do whatnot, but when they have a blockbuster drug, or when they have a blockbuster cosmetic product or a skincare product, do you think the country where the plants came from benefit? No, they don't. And there are cases in Puerto Rico, there are cases in Mauritius, there are cases in many islands, and many countries actually, where that has not happened. And so, there is a development work being done, a global legal framework is being worked with the World Intellectual Property Organization under the UN for us to start documenting. Mauritius will be the first example, or the first use case. We will be documenting indigenous seeds and plants in Mauritius. One of these plants, by the way, is being used for potentially cancer research or finding some type of medical vaccine or medical breakthrough in cancer treatment. This could be significant. So let me take this a bit further. Not only are we going to document these plants and seeds, but we're going to also attach anyone doing research around the world attached to one of these plants and seeds. Why? Because ultimately, if we end up with a drug that actually becomes a blockbuster because it does something amazing like help with finding a solution for one of the diseases or helps mitigate one of the diseases, then what we want to do is make sure that everyone gets credit. It's about royalties and fairness down the entire life cycle of this development, right? I call it R&D distribution of royalties. And so that's the first use case that we'll be focusing on. If anyone has questions on that, and by the way, just so you know, there's an entire pipeline of countries that would like to document and record their seeds and plants. So it's going to be an interesting one. Going mainstream. Let's talk about other industries. I hear a lot, people tell me, there's no real blockchain at work. No one's replaced their systems with a blockchain. I want to give you one example, just because it's been percolating in the financial markets the earliest. Australia Stock Exchange actually replaced their back-end chess system, which is a clearing, execution, and payment system, settlement system, with a blockchain solution. That digital asset, which is Blythe Masters company, put together. Now, you could argue, well, that's a private DLT solution. That doesn't count. Well, no, hold on. I actually think it does, because they have replaced their stock exchange's back-end solution with blockchain, okay? It is a blockchain, and that is significant. I don't think we should be so critical of these kind of advances happening. So next time someone says to you, there's no real-world blockchain solution working, tell them to go look at the ASX example. So they announced that last year that it took them, they've been working on it for a couple years, but they finally announced at the end of last year that they've actually replaced it. There are other cool things going on with governments. Land registry is a huge one. You heard it maybe yesterday with Kavita saying that they're going to be doing something in India. It's going to be critical. Again, formal documentation of assets and land. It's going to be significant. Malta's doing academic certificates on a blockchain. What if in the future you never have to have a background check when you go apply for a job because it's all there? It's already verified. Because the university has given you a QR code or some sort of key to be able to prove that you've actually graduated from that university. It helps with fraud reduction, right? There are a lot of people who still lie on their CVs about what they've done and where they've had experience or what schools they went to. So this is, again, some interesting use cases that are happening. These are the three big areas. I know that you guys have actually touched upon it here, which is why I'm pretty excited. I actually tell people these have been under the radar when it comes to areas where blockchain's really going to take hold this year. Last year, you heard a little bit about energy. I really didn't hear that much about real estate, but now I'm seeing companies and lots of ICOs around these three major industries, and I think that's pretty exciting. And guess what? I think LA is actually pretty well placed for at least 2 out of 3, if not 3 out of 3. Okay, my last bit, and I've got 4 minutes, so I'm going to end it here with one last kind of view of sort of my travels throughout the world. Government and regulatory engagement. Even if your industry is not regulated, I'm sorry, you still have to care about what's going on at the government regulatory side, because they have a way of making things easier, or they have a way of making things difficult, right? So you actually do have to care. There are a number of groups that have formed around the world. Some of them are blockchain consortiums or kind of like industry groups that have formed. Some of them are actually regulatory sandboxes, which have been created by actual regulators in various countries. There's a lot going on, and I actually think cooperation between government and private sector and academia is going to be critical to helping this tech evolve in a way that maybe for financial services is more important, but even for industries where it's not regulated, I think we need this more uniform support. Because what often happens is regulatory and government falls behind the tech. The tech advances really far ahead, and then kind of government and regulatory come after that. Well, in blockchain, shockingly, I find that the delta between, or the difference between the progress actually is not as wide or as deep as I thought it would be. They're actually pretty clued up in a lot of the major countries, and if they're not clued up, they're getting up to speed, or they have research teams that are looking at this stuff. So I think it actually behooves us, even if typically we're like, oh, I'm anti-government, I don't like government, it actually, in some cases, not all cases, makes sense to actually engage. And so I spend a great deal of my time talking to people at the European Parliament or the House of Lords, and they may not understand, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy, but I actually think it's important that we educate, because the better they understand at least the basic elements of this, and I'm not talking about giving them a discourse on how difficulty factor or hash rates work, I'm talking about why this is important and why government support and potentially even funding and money and space is actually critical to this growing in a given city or town. One thing I want to leave you with that I found really promising in the US is I have had conversations in the last year that have covered almost the entire country. So meaning Omaha just launched a blockchain group after we did a session last year. Kansas City, Atlanta, just all over. I'm talking to Louisville right now. We're talking about this really just incubating all over the place. And I think that is important for us to really think about as we grow this technology. It's not just about the 2 major cities that kind of do the tech thing. This is different, and it needs to be different. So I hope all of y'all will make LA great, but also think about the other towns and other places where, you know what, depressed areas also need a lift. This is our opportunity to do it. Let's create companies everywhere. I'm hoping I get an invite from Detroit at some point, because I think that's another great city. I'm going to leave you with my Twitter and contact details if you want to email me or find me on Twitter. I'm happy to take a question since I have a minute. I'll take a question if you guys have one. Otherwise, I appreciate everything you're doing. I think LA is great, and you guys are going to do great things. I have a question back there.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to leverage being implemented into the blockchain. Do you see that happening soon with like Salt, and do you see it happening on a more institutional level?
We're at early stages of the financial side of things. There are huge gaps in crypto investing, crypto assets. This talk was not, I give a separate cryptocurrencies talk where I dissect asset classes, the asset class into various areas. I'll give you the quick version. The way I kind of rationalize all of this or get my head around all of this is crypto is a separate asset class, but even within that, or digital assets is a separate asset class, but even within that, I have different categories. One is cryptocurrencies, or crypto, like pure crypto, like Bitcoin and Ether that have their own network. Their second category, tokenization of physical things, is going to be huge. That to me is so exciting. When we start tokenizing buildings and livestock and, I don't know, anything that anything that people think has value, and then you can start fractionalizing it and selling it, or putting it on the market, or securitizing it, or leveraging on it. I mean, this stuff is just beginning. I actually think we're only scratching the surface. And right now, the third category, I'll leave with you with the third category. Third category is, for me, digitization of current fiat currency. So that's government-backed currency. People are like, well, we already have e-money. Actually, we don't. So I'll tell you why. In this form, I'll give you the example. If the UK government, through the Bank of England, were to actually directly open up mobile wallets and give sterling to their 1 million NHS employees, that's the National Health System, right? They would cut out the banking system, and they would save tens of millions of pounds in admin and reconciliation and all sorts of things. They've actually looked at that. I'm not saying they're doing it, but that to me would be direct government issuance of their sterling in digital form. That's digitized fiat currency. Again, that's my opinion, and that's the use case I give to explain how that would work. You would still have bank accounts as a person, but what would happen is you, as an NHS worker, would receive that directly from the government in your mobile wallet that would hold the sterling, and then you would probably either use it or you would move it to your checking account or your current account in the UK. So I don't think the world is going to get rid of all banks, but I think we're going to start seeing some very interesting alternative solutions to potentially bypassing the banking system, which obviously we're already seeing with Bitcoin. I'm going to leave you with that. We're at the early stages, and I'm going to go because my time is up. So thank you for your time.